Hello again, everyone. I'm Charles Gross.
And I'm Leslie Hogan Blake.
Welcome to Two on the Aisle. Please like and subscribe to our channel.
Today's play is Marcel on the Train. And the Marcel is Marcel Marceau. And for those of you in the audience who do not know why Charlie is trying to get out of the box and knocking on the window, Marcel Marceau was the world's foremost pantomimist. That may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, because he not only introduced pantomime to the contemporary world, he also made a lot of people hate mimes. That's a really sad thing. He had a tremendous trajectory, and then after 20 years or so, people started going, I don't want to see any more mimes. No more mimes. No more of this. It was really very
The
strange.
problem was you had a lot of mimes who would do, the basic, but they couldn't go into as much depth
Well,
as he could.
this story, though, is based on something that really happened in Marceau's life when he was still Marcel Mongol, a young Jewish man in the resistance in France during World War II. And what he did was to save 70 Jewish orphan children from the Nazis by taking them by train in small groups, pretending to be a scout leader and that they were scout children and they were going to, and they would get to the Alps and then they would cross into Switzerland. And he did this several times, very much like Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad, just taking groups of people to safety and to freedom. And those children they all survived. Those 70 children all lived. Ethan Slater, whom we know as SpongeBob SquarePants, not exactly the guy you think of to suddenly play Marcel Marceau, is enamored of Marcel Marceau and of the story and decides to write a play with his friend Marshall Pailet, who also directed the play.
Children are played by adults, and there's kind of a life is beautiful vibe there because he uses pantomime or just shtick to keep them entertained, to calm them down. The children know what's going on, and they know how much danger that they are in. In fact, the highlight of the play is when the train is stopped by the Nazis and this Nazi inspector comes in and he kind of plays around with it.
Well,
He's, well,
you didn't say play.
yes,
He toys with them. He's not playing.
yes, that's actually
like
better.
cat and mouse. But,
Yes.
and that actor, by the way, whose name is Aaron Saratsky, plays everyone else, and he's really very good at that. The children are of different ages. So you said they were all, some of them know. There's a 12-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy who know what's going on. But there's a little girl who doesn't speak, who doesn't really necessarily know. She's just frightened of everything. In the play, they show what happens to these particular children. And this one wants to become a mime. And she studies and studies, and she goes to the school that he established, and the school won't take her. And she keeps saying, let me see him. He knows me. And they won't let her see. That's a sad little moment. I really like that. It was a
It
lovely
is.
little
But there is one very happy moment. One of the children, a girl, has kidney problems, and which leads to urinary problems, very embarrassing for her. And she and Marceau are talking. She's saying, I just want to have a boring life. And then toward the end of the play, she pantomimes that boring life exactly as she described it.
Yes.
And that's one of the highlights of the play. I certainly like Ethan's.
Let's name those actors. The little girl that I was talking about is Maddie Corman, the one who doesn't speak. And the one you're talking about with the kidney trouble is Tedra Millen.
And I certainly liked Ethan Slater. For the most part, this character has one thing in common with SpongeBob. Boy, does he talk a lot. In fact, during the scene with the Nazi, the guy turns and says, "Shut up," which is probably the only time someone ever said that to Marcel Marceau.
And if we were not in the play itself, we might have laughed at that line. But it's a moment where laughter and not laughter come together.
Yes.
There are two other actors, of course, the two boys. Alex Wise played Henri, and Max Gordon Moore plays Adolphe. And Adolphe comes from a mixed background. He has a German parent, and he can speak German. So when Marcel translates what the Nazi says, he says that's not what he said.
Some of the shtick that Ethan Slater does falls flat, and there's an insinuation that it is on these rides where that he was inspired to study mime and to become one. In fact, there's this very interesting scene. They're on their way to Switzerland. They're in the snow. He gets snow thrown in his face, and all of a sudden he becomes Bip.
It's a beautiful theatrical moment that they have him fall in the snow, and he has some white paint in his hand, and he makes his
Right.
face partially white. And then he gets up and they put up a sign and it says, Mr. Bip chases butterflies, which is one of his routines. They always put up a sign on the stage to say what it was that Bip was doing because it wasn't always obvious what he was doing. And, people had to be trained to follow in a mime. He uses butterflies in the train to entertain the children. That's why.
Yeah.
But I actually think that he may have known some of those things because he was a fan of Charlie Chaplin before. I mean, his own biography talks about his interest in silent comedians.
The creators, Marshall Pailet and Slater, freely admit that they have filled in a lot of blanks here. Some of this may have happened, or maybe it didn't. And they
I
do take
realize
dramatic
that.
license, and that's just fine. And I
Right.
did enjoy this play, and I am going to give it 3 3/4 playbills.
I had the problem with this play that I have very often when adults play children. And again, this is in the writing. I think they played children as well as one can play children. But the words in their mouths were not children's words. They were the words of the writer. They were the words of trying to they just sounded like French and German philosophers. And I just couldn't accept that that's what these children were thinking.
So out of the mouths of babes came
Right.
too many
Well,
adults.
and I will give it a 2.5 for the play itself. I will give it a 3 for the concept, for the idea of wanting to do this. It is a story that should be told, but I don't think this was necessarily the way to do it.
And that is our show for today. When you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us too.
On the aisle, doing this.
And